Well thou knowest that earth shall be seized as a booth for the trader. Rome nor Greece nor France can drive back Carthage forever. Always each birth of the silence, attaining the field and the movement, takes from time its reign, for it came for its throne and its godhead. So too shall Mammon take, and his sons, their hour from the ages. Yet is the flame and the dust last end of the silk and the iron, and at their end the king and the prophet shall govern the nations. Even as Troy, so shall Babylon flame up to heaven for the spoiler, wailed by the merchant afar, as he sees the red glow from the ocean. Up from the seats of the mighty, the earth-shaker rose. His raiment round him, purple and dominant, rippled and murmured and whispered of Argosies sunk, and the pearls and the nereids playing, murmured of azure solitudes, sounded of storm and the death wail. Even as the march of his waters, so was the pace of the sea-god, flowing on, endless through time, with a glittering symbol of empire crowned over his fatal brows. In his grasp was the wrath of the trident. Tripled force, life-shattering, brutal, imperial, sombre. Resonant, surging, vast in the pomp of his clamorous greatness, proud and victorious he came to his home in the far spuming waters, even as a soul from the heights of thought plunges back into living, so he plunged like a rock through the foam. For it falls from a mountain overpeering the waves in some silence of desolate waters, left to the wind and the seagull, where ocean alone with the ages dreams of the calm of the skies, or tosses its prey to the wind gods. Tosses forever its foam, in the solitude huge of its longings, far from the homes and the noises of men. So the dark-browed Poseidon came to his coral halls and the sapphire stables of Nereus, ever where champ their bits the harnessed steeds of the ocean, watched by foam-white girls in the caverns of still Amphitrite. There was his chariot yoked by the Tritons, drawn by his coursers, born of the fleeing sea spray, and shod with the north wind, who journey black like the front of the storm, and closed with their manes as with thunder. This now rose from its depths to the upper tumults of ocean, bearing the awful brows and the mighty form of the sea-god. And from the roar of the surges fast o'er the giant margin came remembering the storm and the swiftness wide towards the Troad. So among men he arrived, to the clamorous labours of Ares. Close by the stern Diomedes stood, and frowned o'er the battle. He for the Trojan slaughter chose for his mace, and his sword edge, iron Tydeus' son, and the adamant heart of young Pyrrhus. But in the courts divine, the Father high of the immortals turned in his heart to the brilliant offspring born of his musings, she who tranquil observes and judges her father and all things. What shall I say to the thought that is calm in thy breasts, O Athene? Have I not given thee earth for thy portion, throned thee and armoured, darkened Cyprus' smile, dimmed Hera's sun and Latona's. Swift in thy silent ambition, proud in thy radiant sternness, girl, thou shalt rule with the Greek and the Saxon, the Frank and the Roman. Worker and fighter and builder and thinker, light of the reason, men shall leave all temples to crowd in thy courts, O Athene. Go then and do my will, prepare man's tribes for their fullness. But with her high clear smile on him answered the mighty Athene. Wisely and soberly, tenderly smiled she, chiding her father, even as a mother might rail at her child when he hides and dissembles. Zeus, I see, and I am not deceived by thy words in my spirit. We but build forms for thy thought, while thou smilest down high o'er our toiling. Even as men are we tools for thee, who are thy children and dear ones. All this life is thy sport, and thou work'st like a boy at his engines, making a toil of the game and a play of the serious labour. Then to that play thou callest us, wearing a sombre visage, this consulting, that to our wills confiding, O ruler, choosing thy helpers, hastened by those whom thou lurest to oppose thee. Guile thou usest with gods as with mortals, scheming, deceiving, and at the wrath and the love thou hast prompted, laughest in secret. So we too, who are sisters and enemies, lovers and rivals, fondled and baffled in turn, obey thy will and thy cunning. I, thy girl of war, and the rosy white Aphrodite. Always we served but thy pleasure, since our immortal beginnings. Always each other we helped by our play and our wrestlings and quarrels. This too I know, that I pass, preparing the parts of Apollo, and at the end, as his sister and slave and bride, I must sojourn, wrapped to his courts of mystic light and unbearable brilliance. Was I not ever condemned since my birth from the toil of thy musings, seized like a lyre in my body, to sob and to laugh out his music, shake as a leaf in his fierceness, and leap as a flame in his splendours? So must I dwell, overpowered, and so must I labour subjected, robbed of my loneliness pure, and coerced in my radiant freedom, now whose clearness and pride are the sovereign joy of thy creatures. Such the reward that thou keepst for my labour, obedient always. Yet I work, and I do thy will, for 'tis mine, O my Father. Proud of her ruthless lust of thought, and action and battle, swift-footed rose the daughter of Zeus from her sessions immortal, breasts of the morning unveiled, in a purity awful and candid, head of the mighty dawn, the goddess Pallas Athene. Strong and rapacious, she swooped on the world as her prey and her booty. Down from the courts of the mighty descending, darting on Ida, dire she descended, a god in her reason, a child in her longings, joy and woe to the world that is given to the whims of the child-god, greedy for rule and play, and the minds of men and their doings. So, with her aegis scattering light o'er the heads of the nations, shining-eyed in her boyish beauty, severe and attractive, came to the fields of the Troad, came to the fateful warfare, veiled, the goddess calm and pure, in her luminous raiment, zoned with beauty and strength. Rejoicing, spurring the fighters, close o'er Odysseus she stood, and the clear-eyed governed the battle. Zeus to Hephaestus next, the Cyclopean toiler, turned. Hephaestus, the strong-souled priest and king, and a bond-slave, servant of men in their homes and their workshops, servant of nature. He who has built these worlds and kindles the fire for a mortal. Thou, my son, art obedient always. Wisdom is with thee, therefore thou knowest and obeyest. Submission is wisdom and knowledge. He who is blind revolts, and he who is limited struggles. Strife is not for the infinite. Wisdom observes to accomplish. Troy and her sons and her works are thy food today, O Hephaestus. And to his father, the toiler answered, the silent seer. Yes, I obey thee, my father, and that which than thou is more mighty. Even as thou obeyest by rule, so I by my labour. Now must I heap the furnace, now must I toil at the smithy, I, who have flamed on the altar of sacrifice, helping the sages. I am the Cyclops, the lamester, who once was pure and a high priest. Holy the pomp of my flames, ascendant from pyre and from altar, robed men's souls for their heavens, and my smoke was a pillar to nature. Though I have burned in the sight of the sage and the heart of the hero, now is no nobler hymn for my ear than the clanging of metal, breath of human greed, and the dolorous pant of the engines. Still I repine not, but toil. For to toil I was yoked by my Maker. I am your servant, O gods, and his, of whom you are servants. But to the toiler Zeus replied, to the servant of creatures, what is the thought thou hast uttered, betrayed by thy speech, O Hephaestus? True is it earth shall grow as a smithy, the smoke of the furnace fill men's eyes, and their souls shall be stunned with the clang of the hammers. Yet in the end there is rest on the peak of a labour accomplished. Nor shall the might of the thinker be quelled by that iron oppression. Nor shall the soul of the warrior despair in the darkness triumphant. For when the night shall be deepest, dawn shall increase on the mountains, and in the heart of the worst, the best shall be born by my wisdom. Pallas, thy sister, shall guard man's knowledge, fighting the earth's smoke. Thou too art mighty to live through the clamour, even as Apollo. Work then, endure. Expect from the silence an end, and thy wages. So King Hephaestus arose and passed from the courts of his father,